Good evening, I'm Lee Anderson. We begin with our continuing coverage of this breaking story in Bend where protesters are trying to block buses operated by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We begin our live team coverage this evening with Max GOLDWASSER, who's been on the scene for a few hours now. Max, what can you tell us?
Yeah, Lee, all afternoon chants of let them go and no justice, no peace echoing through the crowd here in the parking lot at the Crane Shed Commons in the Box Factory. Many protesters holding up signs that say abolish ICE, stop separating families, and it ain't right. And the crowd here, it continues to grow in size. I would estimate there are more than 250 protesters here on hand, many of whom have been here for the last 5 hours, and they say they plan on being here into the night, continuing to fight. And we are still trying to gather more information, but we do know ICE is not here as a part of a sweep for undocumented immigrants in town. Bend Mayor Sally Russell tweeted earlier today, 2 men were detained and are being held in those white ICE vehicles that you were looking at. She says both had warrants out for their arrest. And that's important to note because Bend is what's called a welcoming city. And that means it does not enforce federal immigration laws nor detain people based on immigration status alone.
We are currently living in a police state right now, and in Bend, Oregon, everybody thinks that it's some great savior little nook in the world where nothing's going to happen. And I've been saying it for a long time. The longer we sit in our comfortability of Bend, Oregon, the longer that we choose to remain silent and neutral is what is going to ultimately turn Bend into Portland.
U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement told News Channel 21 in an email, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement fully respects the rights of all people to voice their opinion peacefully without interference. And there has been a heavy police presence on hand all afternoon and into the evening here with Bend Police just off camera. And they are only on hand for crowd control purposes to make sure that people are not getting out of control, to ensure the safety of people here, because Bend Police do not enforce ICE arrests. Lee, back to you.
Some of the protesters belong to a group called Central Oregon Peacekeepers. That's a fairly new activist group that's getting a lot of attention today. As Max reported, Bend Police arrived at the scene for crowd control. Bend Mayor Sally Russell says the city does not use funds, personnel, nor equipment to enforce federal immigration laws. She and Bend Police have made it clear they are not assisting ICE agents. Our live team coverage continues now with Jack Hirsch, who's also been there at the site most of the afternoon. Jack?
Yeah, Lee, when I got on scene about 4.5 hours ago, there were only about 30 people here. And as you can see behind me, there's obviously a lot more. And that's because Central Oregon Peacekeepers President Luke Richter went live on the group's Facebook page. And Richter stood directly in front of the bus, keeping it from leaving because he was told there were ICE detainees on board. I also spoke to JUAREZ, who claims to know 2 men on the buses.
They didn't identify themselves. They're not telling people who they are. They're hiding their logos. They usually have Homeland Security. They're hiding everything to scoop people up. They're not grabbing criminals. They're not grabbing troublemakers. They got 2 guys. One of them was going to work. The other one was coming home from work.
Lee, several of the protesters, including JUAREZ I spoke to, were upset about ICE's presence in Bend, claiming that it is a welcoming city. As you can hear, protesters continue chanting now, meaning that you cannot be detained based on immigration status alone, as Max mentioned earlier. Many of these protesters right here say they will stay here until the detainees are let off the bus, and some even told me that this could be a very, very long night for them. Lee, back to you.